All right, how are you feeling about that after watching the first debate, the first time meeting actually in person for former President Trump and Vice President Harris in their first and possibly only debate of this election season? I'm going to get your name right for the first time tonight. We've got a couple of distinguished guests with us this evening. Jennifer Stoddard-Hoydu, the former chair of the Dallas County GOP, and also Delia Parker Mims, the chair of the Denton County Democratic Party.
Let me run to the fridge.
You're slipping away.
Let me run to the fridge.
Oh yes, by all means, we will give you a pass for that.
Keep talking.
Can we start? Usually we kind of go linearly through these things. Can we start at the end though, and sort of work our way back from there? It struck me there at the very end, the closing statements for these two candidates. We talked earlier tonight in some of the breaks about how it didn't seem like we got into a lot of policy. We didn't get a lot of policy details. It seems like there at the end, in that last pitch to voters, Vice President Harris was trying to paint a rosier picture of the way forward and a vision for the future, at least her vision anyway. And she has accused former President Trump in the past of only thinking about himself. But I thought it was interesting that he spent his entire closing statement talking about her. What did you think about that? Is that just trying to get in there and maybe make the case to those people who are still undecided that she's not the candidate, or was that the right move?
Well, I think he's trying to make a contrast as to, do you want the same thing you've had for the last 3.5 years, or do you want change? She tries to be the change agent, but the fact of the matter is she's been in the White House for the last 3.5 years, and actually the Democrats have had the White House 12 of the last 16 years, I believe. So he's really the change person. So I think he was trying to say, listen, you say you want to do all these wonderful things, but you haven't done them. You've been there, you've been part of the Biden administration, and you haven't done them. And so I think he's just trying to hone in to voters. If you are better off now than you were 4 years ago, I guess maybe you want to keep her. But I think most people would answer that question and say, I'm not better off than I was 4 years ago. The famous Reagan quote. But it's really poignant here because 4 years ago, President Trump was the president of the United States. Well,
and I know that he's a different kind of candidate and a different kind of campaigner, and I think people bake that in and they expect that from him in a way. But there was, in the closing statement there, he's saying it's a failing country. We've always heard this, adage that, the politician who seems like they are, the more optimistic one usually wins. Again, he hasn't changed much from the first time, and he won before.
Yes.
Is there a risk in that?
I think people know who he is. I mean, I just don't see with him that there's a risk. People know that he's very blunt. They know he's a New York businessman. He was like this when he ran for president against Hillary Clinton and won. He was like this when he was president of the United States, and he was like this when he ran against President Biden.
So he sort of defies that rule.
I don't think people are expecting him to be different.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to note when you say he won. He's never won the popular vote. So he won because we have an electoral process, and which discouraged lots of young people who didn't understand why on earth is he president if he didn't win the popular vote. Never. He has shown us who he is, and he's never answered any policy position. He's never taken responsibility for anything. And I think what we got out of this is certainly a vision of what type of America we want. And because we weren't really knee deep in policy, we saw that Vice President Kamala, in the end, she closed with trying to be more positive and try to give a little bit more detail about what she wants to target when she becomes president. Now, one thing she said was, we inherited the mess that Trump's presidency created. And that was true. But we didn't hear anything about inflation or why we need to go after price gougers, not capping prices, which is what they've said. So I think one thing we may agree upon is they didn't talk about the economy as much. But what she did try to say is, we inherited a bunch of mess. We've been fixing a bunch of mess. We've got a booming manufacturing, and all he did is say is, no, they do not. But the reality is we do. We have the strongest economy in the country. Are we feeling it? No, because of inflation and the root cause of that. But we didn't hear anything about that. But if you followed Vice President Kamala at all and listened to her policies, she talks about the reason why we have inflation. And you can't, and it can't be done, pinpoint a reason why we have higher prices now other than we have companies that are making record profits using COVID as an excuse to raise prices. I think we should have got into that a little bit more because people do want to hear about how we have to continue to move forward.
Let me ask briefly, I have to run downstairs and do a quick TV hit at the top of our 10 o'clock newscast in just a moment, but we saw Trump animated and angry tonight. That's not unusual for him. That's what that's his brand. Harris had to come out here and define herself. And the question is, did she do that tonight, Jennifer? Do you think she did?
I don't think she did at all. Really what I think she did, she spent all of her time giving speeches, attacking Trump, and trying to hit trigger points with him and trying to get him ruffled. But he was the same
It
Trump.
seemed to work several times, though.
He was the same Trump the whole way through. He never really picked a fight with her. He didn't turn around and look at her. He was very good. He was very disciplined about not getting into a tit for tat with her, at least visually. And I don't think he had a lot of choice. I mean, the moderators basically asked very few questions that didn't favor Vice President Harris.
See, this is exactly why Trump's tactics and he was only talking to his base. If you see tonight's show and say, he was defending himself, when literally he's the one who said that immigrants are eating people's animals. Okay?
He did repeat
he
that
said
tonight.
that multiple times.
He went there,
He
yeah.
said that people are having abortions at 9 months. At 9 months, they're delivering and they're having abortions. He's making these outrageous.
He also said crime is up and through the roof, and then.
And it's a lie that crime actually is down.
And on all three of those things, the crime is up and through the roof. The thing about abortions being carried out after the baby is born, and on the statement that he made about immigrants eating dogs and cats. The moderators did fact check him on all three of those, as well as his recent comments that he did lose the last election by a whisker, and they were asking him, is that a change from you saying for so long that it was stolen? And he said, well, that was sarcasm recently when I said it was by a whisker. And David Muir responded that he watched the videos of him saying that they had lost by a whisker, and it did not appear to be sarcasm. So there were some instances of fact-checking. I don't remember seeing any instances of fact-checking with Vice President Harris tonight. We didn't see I don't think any fact-checking in the first debate between Trump and Biden.
Absolutely not.
And there were instances in which it was you're sitting there waiting
way
for
off
it to
the
happen,
rails in
and
that
it just
debate.
didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right, but you can say there was no fact-checking, but what did Vice President Kamala say that actually was a lie? President Trump literally said statements that were lies and contradicted himself in statements that we know that he said. He didn't take responsibility for anything that has happened, and that's why he had to be fact-checked. When you're telling the American people Democrats want to have abortions at 9 months, those are such outlandish statements that are not even rooted in reality. Immigrants are eating your animals. I'm not even certain he didn't say immigrants aren't eating children. Did he say that?
He did not say that.
I didn't hear that one, no.
He did not say that.
I'm
But you
surprised
know
he
what?
didn't say that.
But Vice President Harris absolutely said that she's never been in favor of banning fracking, and I've seen her say it with my own two eyes on several broadcasts. She denied many of her policies. If you go to her ACLU report that she filled out, it's pretty shocking. And she backed off of all that stuff, but she didn't say, I've changed my mind, and here's why I've changed my mind. Here's what made me think differently.
She actually did, though.
She acted as though she had never really supported those policies.
No, because the question to her was specifically, you said you wanted fracking, but now you didn't, but you're saying you haven't changed your values. So in actuality, it wasn't that she made a statement. They actually asked her, how did you change your position? And she said, we need to depend less on foreign oil. We need to learn how to have different ways of having energy. And she has evolved her position on fracking. She didn't say, I never said that. That's actually completely untrue.
I think
it's almost
she
reminiscent of
evolved her
Trump.
position on fracking because she wants to win the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, I think it's important to evolve. We did not see an evolved Donald Trump tonight. We saw the same Donald Trump. We saw the bitter, we saw the angry, we saw the hostile, we saw the name calling, we saw the you're weak. And even though none of them were able to bring in policy, although Vice President Kamala tried to address what her priorities would be in her closing, she was able to draw a contrast.
I'm going to step downstairs. You guys keep chatting with Wheeler here.
Okay.
She was able to draw a contrast.
If it gets too hot, spread these out here too.
Oh yeah, give
Oh,
me
well,
one.
I would like to have
What
one
are
now.
we waiting on?
I'm going to try this one.
You said
she
she
was
was-
able to draw a contrast between herself and him, even though they weren't allowed to really get into their policy. She drew a contrast in terms of this is what you have to look forward to again, and sitting there watching him completely lie. I don't know why he elongates things in the end, that she's black or the immigrants or whatever. It's almost like we went back to PTSD and we could remember, do we want to go back 4 years to this type of temperament? And I think since they didn't do policy, we had to look at them today and say, who has the temperament that we want to move forward? That's really all they presented today.
Now, when we say that they didn't get too deeply into policy, is that a function of the questions weren't right, or did you notice, I noticed this, both of them came out, they both seemed like they had prepared sort of what they wanted to talk about tonight, and it seems like whatever was asked, a lot of times the answer sort of veered, way off into, what the talking point was, and they were not pulled back by the moderators, who were dealing with a limited amount of time, though.
I thought the moderators were terrible. This really wasn't a debate.
I can't remember the last time I heard, though, a debate where people went, the moderators did a great job tonight. That's a hard job.
Well, I don't know
Isn't
that
it?
what we should expect out of debates going forward is the same thing. One thing about Trump, he's a show horse. He's not a workhorse, and he's not concerned about the average person, but he's a show horse. And we saw that tonight because he did his shtick, his routine. We saw Vice President Kamala continuously say, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about what the American people are interested in. And she tried to do that. When they tried to pinpoint him on, well, do you have any responsibility for killing the immigration bill? He didn't even talk about that. They do that all the time. I think maybe our expectations of what we get out of these debates might need to change.
Yeah.
And when you want to learn more of a policy issue, you should start listening more to their town halls or look on their website or any of their rallies.
I think that's a
because
great
we're not
point.
getting that.